to write a book, I'm going to stand on your side. If you wanted to write a book, you had to go to a printer. Now all of a sudden you could, instead of handwriting it, you could type it, and it really looked like a book in the end. So that was a big deal to individual authors and writers, and so the typewriter was really a very important invention during that time. But because we have the signing of the Emancipation Proclamation, now what we call the colored troop, not sounding to be offensive, but that's the term they used at that time. So the colored troop were allowed to serve in the military. This is an actual saddle from the colored troop. There was a big problem. They engaged in the Indian Wars. So they used our black military and to kill the Indians, or to get engaged in that war. War is always just horrible, and that's why the museum is talking about how can we eliminate war, right? But because now you have the invention of electricity, and yes, now of course Abraham Lincoln becomes assassinated, and this is an actual newspaper that announces the murder, assassination of Abraham Lincoln. But because we now have electricity, you have the first electric fair in Chicago, 1893, the Chicago World Fair. The idea is to have a little village. They're building the Brooklyn Bridge in New York, but for the first time in this country, which was a Christian, mostly Protestant country, they have what they call the Chicago, the first Parliament of world religions. This is where you see the first time Muslims, you see Hindus, and it became a big deal. And still today, on a regular basis, in various continents, they are holding still the World Parliament of Religions. And that is also, by the way, where the Baha'i Faith was first announced by a Presbyterian minister, because 1892 Baha'u'llah died. And they wanted to show something interfaith, so they talked about, a year ago, we were there and we were at his funeral because it had tens of thousands of followers. So this is supposed to show here the World Parliament of Religion with some actual items, like a commemorative plate, an album, actual original photograph, even a handkerchief out of the Chicago World Fair. So now what we are progressing from the telephone now, right? We went from telegraph to telephone. Now we're getting here into the turn of the century. So Tesla is happening. You're going to have the opening of the Panama Canal, the first formation in this country in 1909, and NAACP is forming. Yes, you have the Tycoons. The Wright brothers are taking off with their flight, and Panama Canal is opening. We're going to the North Pole, to the South Pole. So it is becoming a more outward-looking global community, and we're getting into radio. Einstein, right there, right? Man of Trees, right, all happening over here now. We're now in 1920s to 1940, right? So now that we have Ford Motor Car, the first traffic light invented by a black man. So really that innovation is bringing the community into filmmaking is happening, right? So Peter's grandfather, General Cheatham, because he was in charge of the army, this young man came to him and said, could I borrow an airplane? I have an idea and I let you know how it goes. And he decides to let him go ahead with that. And the telegram came back to him and said, Dear General Cheatham, successfully landed in Paris, signed Charles Lindbergh. I have that telegram at home. I don't want to really put it out here because it's a little tempting, you know what I mean? So anyway, so you have Charles, unfortunately, you'll have Amelia Earhart happening, right? And the towers are building in New York, and Gandhi is happening. Now, unfortunately, World War I breaks out, because over there you have the Wright brothers, right? And now we're getting into a World War I. Out of that comes then the League of Nations. That first peace coming together of certain countries that we have a really great video on that, where we thought no more war, right? This is it. We had a world war, and surely it can't happen again. I have, by the way, I've been to the Marshall Islands, and to just share with you. And there was always a rumor, where is Amelia Earhart? And the Marshall Islands always felt that she went down in the outside of the Marshall Islands, outside of the atolls in Majuro. Recently, they have they're still working that, but they think that she actually did land. Her plane did land, ran out of fuel. Is basically what happened. Indeed, outside of the Majuro, Kwajalein, Majuro, that area, and that she did make it alive onto the atoll, but the problem is there was no food. And ultimately, she actually didn't die because of the plane running out of fuel, that she actually died of starvation, because they found bones, they found clothes, and they are pretty well have confirmed at this point now that that he died probably in the plane crash, and she made it ashore because she could swim ashore. And so that's why we have the Marshall Island t-shirt here, and you think, why bother? But we have it right underneath, because so we'll probably have that confirmation. I've seen a documentary on it already. Okay, World War I. So you think you learned our lesson, but of course we didn't. We're going to go into World War II. And out of that then came the formation of United Nations, right? But we're also going from radio to television. Grainy as it was and primitive as it was, but we have television broadcasting. We're opening up the Dead Sea Scrolls. We're discovering that, and climbing up to Mount Everest. And here we found in our home, in my home here, we found these old newspapers all crinkled up behind the walls. You know how that sometimes goes. Anyway, you got television, and think of it in 20 years. 20 years later, we're putting man on the moon. I was there when we watched that grainy black TV. All those men were landing on the moon, and we got them back out of the moon and dumped them back in the water, and they walked alive back on shore. Think about those hidden figures and the computer capacity that they had to bring him there, nail it exactly where they thought they were going to go, and bring him back where we hoped they were going to land. It's amazing, the technology that from barely green TV, computers, oh my God, right? But they made it. But at the same time, we have the civil rights movement. We have finally, after the Man of the Trees, we now have Earth Day, and Nelson Mandela, right? We have the civil rights movement and the breaking out of some, what I call a fair and just society that we're still trying to walk towards, and we don't have a clue where we're going, because it sure isn't where it's supposed to be. But we're experimenting with democracy that hopefully, I think one day on a global scale we'll get it right. But I think it's going to be the conceptualizing maybe of a World Federation, so that everybody has say and everybody has impact.